She only smiled when she was teasing me. Calm, confident, and far too composed for the flutter she caused inside me. That night, when she leaned closer and said, "Your weekends must be busy, mine's free for you," I knew my quiet life was about to change. The cafe was nearly empty when she first spoke to me. Soft jazz drifted from the corner speakers, the kind that filled the silence without asking for attention. I was there, like always, finishing some notes on my laptop, a habit that made Saturday evenings blur into one another. The barista had already started cleaning up when she walked in, her presence effortless, like she belonged to the place more than the furniture did. She wasn't the kind of woman who tried to be noticed. Yet the air seemed to rearrange itself when she moved, her calm confidence drawing quiet respect. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands falling free. Her hands rested on the counter as she chatted with the owner, her laughter low and warm. It wasn't until she glanced my way that I realized she'd seen me before. Maybe every weekend, sitting alone in the same corner. When our eyes met, she smiled. Not the polite kind, but one that carried a hint of mischief, like she already knew something I didn't. "You again," she said lightly, stepping closer. "You work here more than the staff do." I laughed, closing my laptop halfway. Guilty. Weekends are for catching up. Her brow arched, teasing. "Your weekends must be busy." A pause, deliberate. "Mine's free for you." The words hung there, playful on the surface but charged underneath. For a heartbeat, I wasn't sure how to respond. There was something about the way she said it. The easy smirk paired with eyes that watched for my reaction, as though testing whether I'd take her seriously. I didn't. Not completely. But I didn't dismiss it either. "Then maybe I should make better use of my weekends," I said. She tilted her head, clearly amused. "Maybe you should." That small exchange shouldn't have meant much. Yet as she turned away to grab her coffee, I caught the faint scent of her perfume. Subtle, floral, and warm. The kind of scent that lingers long after the person's gone. She thanked the barista, nodded at me, and left. The bell above the door chimed, and suddenly the cafe felt emptier than before. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark window, wondering why her voice kept replaying in my head. It wasn't just the words, it was her tone. Casual but not careless. Confident, but with a trace of curiosity beneath it. Outside, I saw her pause beneath the streetlight, pulling her coat tighter. She looked back for just a second, maybe to see if I was watching. I was, and when she smiled faintly before walking away, I knew it wasn't the last time we'd talk. That night, I didn't get much work done. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't mind. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was something quieter. A spark that promised to burn slow. The next weekend, she was there before me. Same cafe, same mellow afternoon light spilling through the wide glass windows. I almost turned back when I saw her. Part surprise, part hesitation, but she looked up and smiled as if she had been expecting me. "Back to your office," she said, motioning to my usual table. I grinned, pretending not to notice how her tone softened around the edges. "You remembered." "I remember patterns," she replied, stirring her coffee slowly. "And you're a predictable one." Her teasing felt easy now, like a language we both already knew. I took the seat across from her, the only one left by the window, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, though. It had texture warm, alive, filled with small sounds. The quiet hum of the espresso machine, the faint clink of cups, and the low jazz that seemed to follow us from last week. She had a notebook open in front of her, the pages half filled with little sketches. Bits of flowers, windows, hands. I asked if she drew often. "Only when something feels worth remembering," she said, not looking up. "And is this one of those times?" Her eyes lifted, catching mine. "Maybe. Ask me again later." Something about her calmness drew me in, like she had long ago made peace with her own company. It wasn't loneliness. It was comfort. I watched her fingers trace the edge of her mug. Her nails painted a shade too subtle to notice unless you were paying attention. Time passed unnoticed. Sometimes we spoke about books, music, places we'd never been. Other times, silence carried everything. When our hands brushed reaching for the sugar, it felt accidental at first. But neither of us moved away. Her skin was warm, her touch light, deliberate in its restraint. She smiled, barely. See? Even sugar brings people together. Dangerous substance, I said quietly. Sweet, but addictive. Her laughter was soft, the kind that stays in your chest after it fades. As the sky outside began to turn amber, the cafe lights dimmed, giving the room a tender glow. She closed her notebook and leaned back, her gaze thoughtful. You always look like you're chasing something, she said. Work, goals, time, something just out of reach. Maybe I am. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Just don't chase so hard you forget to notice who's right in front of you. That line stayed with me long after she left. When I walked home, I realized I hadn't checked my phone for hours. The world outside the cafe felt noisier, heavier. But for those few hours with her across the table, quiet, steady, and impossibly present, I'd forgotten everything that usually pressed on me. It wasn't a date. It wasn't planned. It was something in between. Shared solitude, warm and unspoken, the kind that starts to matter before either person admits it. By the third weekend, the cafe staff had started to notice. It wasn't anything dramatic, just the subtle smiles exchanged behind the counter, the knowing glance from the barista when she set 2 cups down instead of 1. I could feel it too, that quiet curiosity circling us like invisible air. Maybe it was because we always sat close, not close enough to draw attention, but close enough that our laughter lingered longer than it should. That afternoon, an acquaintance from work happened to stop by. He spotted me instantly and came over, his grin a little too wide. Didn't know you had company, he said, his tone sharp with mischief. Before I could reply, she smiled politely, composed as ever. We're just friends, she said easily, but I caught the faint tightness in her voice, the smallest flicker of discomfort. After he left, the silence between us felt different, heavy. She stirred her coffee, though it was already cold. People talk, she murmured. They always do. I wanted to say it didn't matter, but I knew it did, to her at least. The difference in how the world would see us wasn't something either of us could ignore. Her smile that day never quite reached her eyes. When I tried to lighten the mood, she played along, but her laughter came too quickly, like she was pushing it out before it could sound real. Later, as the sky darkened and rain began to thread down the windows, she said she should go. I followed her to the door, unsure why it suddenly felt like saying goodbye. The rain outside was steady, the kind that makes you whisper even when you're alone. Do you ever worry about what people think? She asked quietly, not looking at me. Sometimes, I admitted, but not right now. She exhaled a soft laugh, one that didn't hide the sadness behind it. You're lucky, then. I wanted to tell her that she made me forget to care about any of that the moments with her felt like their own small world, one where nothing outside could touch us. But something stopped me. Maybe it was respect, maybe fear, maybe the truth that saying too much would make it all too real too soon. When she stepped into the rain, I saw her hesitate for half a second, then pull her coat closer, head down, walking fast. I stayed by the window, watching her umbrella fade into the blur of gray. That night, I didn't go back to the cafe's work I'd planned. I just sat there with her words looping in my mind. People talk. They do. But for reasons I couldn't explain, I found myself wishing they'd talk more, if only to remind me that what we had, quiet as it was something worth noticing, even if neither of us was ready to admit it yet. The next weekend came with a different kind of quiet. The cafe felt emptier than usual. Even though the same music played, the same smell of roasted beans filled the air. She wasn't inside when I arrived, and I almost convinced myself she wouldn't come. But when I stepped out to leave, I saw her sitting on the steps, coat wrapped around her, hair slightly wind-tossed, eyes lost somewhere between thought and memory. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside her. Neither of us spoke. The street was calm, washed in the faint gold of the setting sun. The air smelled faintly of rain and coffee. Familiar, grounding. After a while, she said quietly, "I didn't mean to make things awkward." "You didn't," I replied. "The world did." She smiled faintly, eyes still forward. "That's generous of you. But I know when I start complicating things." There was a gentleness in her tone. Not apology, but self-awareness. The kind that comes from years of learning when to step back before someone else does. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't complicated, that she made my days lighter, steadier. But I also knew she'd hear that as a promise, and promises carry weight. So I stayed silent. A bus passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the curve of her cheek. She looked older in that moment. Not in years, but in expression, as if carrying something invisible yet heavy. Finally, she spoke again, softer now. "You remind me how it feels to be noticed again." It wasn't a confession. More like a truth she didn't mean to say out loud. I turned to look at her. The words lingered between us, raw and fragile. She glanced at me once, then looked away, a quiet laugh slipping out as if embarrassed. "I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I needed to hear it," I said. She didn't answer, but after a moment, her head leaned gently against my shoulder. Just that simple, wordless, pure. Her hair brushed against my jaw, carrying a faint trace of perfume. The warmth of her rested against me, steady, grounding. My breath slowed without me realizing it. The world around us softened. Traffic sounds faded. Time itself seemed to still. There was no rush, no tension. Just two people finding calm in each other's company. The smallest distance now gone. When she finally sat up again, she smiled. A real one this time, quiet but full of light. "I should get going," she whispered, "before this starts feeling too easy." I smiled back. Maybe it should feel easy. Her eyes lingered on mine, searching for something, then drifted away. As she walked off into the dusk, I stayed there. The warmth of her touch still on my shoulder, her words echoing inside me. It wasn't love yet, but it was something I couldn't name. A peace that somehow hurt to feel. The following weekend arrived, but she didn't. I waited longer than I should have, pretending to be absorbed in my work, glancing at the door every time it opened. The cafe felt wrong without her. Too bright, too noisy, like the world had shifted a few inches out of place. By the time I accepted she wasn't coming, it was already dark. I packed up slowly, wondering if maybe that quiet moment on the steps had been our ending rather than a beginning. But she returned a week later. Same cafe, same corner. Only this time her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You've been avoiding me," I said gently. She shook her head, her expression calm but distant. "Just giving space. It's easy to forget what's sensible when you start enjoying something too much." Her words landed heavy. She tried to sound detached, but her hands betrayed her, fidgeting slightly with the napkin, folding and unfolding its edges. I leaned back, studying her. "Is that what this is?" I asked softly. "Something you shouldn't enjoy?" Her gaze met mine for a second, then dropped. "You don't see it, do you? The difference between us. You could be anywhere with anyone your age, your world just opening. Mine's already quieter. People notice when quiet things start making noise." I wanted to argue, to tell her that I didn't care about anyone else's noise. But the look in her eyes stopped me. There was something raw there. Fear, not of me, but of the world that would misunderstand us both. "I just don't want you to regret anything later," she said finally. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "You're kind, and that kindness feels dangerous because it makes me forget the years I've spent building walls." I let the silence hold her words for a while before answering. "Maybe walls aren't meant to last forever." She exhaled, the sound halfway between a sigh and a laugh. "You're too young to talk like that." "Maybe," I said, smiling faintly. "Or maybe I just finally found someone worth saying it to." That broke her composure just a little. Her lips parted, her expression softening, but she looked away before the emotion could settle. She took a slow sip of coffee, her hand trembling slightly as she set the cup down. For the first time, I noticed the faint lines near her eyes, the traces of years lived fully honestly. They didn't make her older. They made her real. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated, one hand on the back of the chair. "You don't make this easy," she said quietly. "Neither do you." Her smile returned, small but genuine. "Then maybe that's why I keep coming back." And then she was gone again, leaving behind a table still warm from her touch, and a silence that refused to fade. It wasn't distance that hurt. It was knowing she cared enough to step back. Saturday came again, and for the first time in weeks I didn't know if I should go. The cafe had become more than a place. It was a pattern, a quiet heartbeat I'd grown used to. But patterns hurt when they break. I stood outside for a long moment, hands in my pockets, watching through the glass. She was there, alone. I walked in before I could change my mind. She looked up, surprised, or maybe relieved. Her eyes softened instantly, the kind of look that said she'd been waiting even if she wouldn't admit it. "You're late," she said, pretending to sound casual. "I wasn't sure you'd want me to come." "Well," she murmured, "you're here now." I sat down across from her. There was no teasing this time, no careful distance. Just quiet, the kind that feels like the space before a decision. She spoke first. "I shouldn't have pulled away." I didn't interrupt. Her fingers played with the edge of her cup, tracing slow circles. "I told myself I was being sensible," she continued. "But the truth is, I was scared. Scared that I'd let myself start to need this." Her honesty hit deeper than I expected. There was no performance in her voice, just weariness and something tender beneath it. "I don't want to make your life complicated," she said softly. "You deserve something simple." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. "Maybe I don't want simple. Maybe I just want honest." That made her pause. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady but unsure. "And what is this, then? Honest?" "Yes," I said. "You don't have to protect me from what people think. I know what this looks like, but I also know how it feels, and that's real enough for me." For a long time, she said nothing. The cafe around us seemed to fade. The sound of steaming milk, the faint laughter from another table, all of it distant. Then, finally, she reached out. Her hand brushed my wrist, hesitant at first, then firmer. That small touch carried everything she couldn't say. Her skin was cool at first, then warm. I could feel her pulse, slow, deliberate, alive. She drew a deep breath. "You're going to make me forget my rules." "Maybe they're not rules," I said softly. "Maybe they're fears." Something in her expression broke. Not in sadness, but in surrender. The fight she'd carried quietly for weeks eased out of her shoulders. She looked at me for a long time, eyes reflecting something between hope and disbelief. Then, almost a whisper, "Then let's stop pretending." The words weren't loud, but they filled every corner of that small cafe. Outside, rain began again. Soft, rhythmic, forgiving. Her hand stayed on mine as we talked about nothing and everything. The distance was gone now, not forced away but replaced by something steady and real. We hadn't declared anything. We didn't need to. In that moment, choice had already become connection. The following weekend felt different, quieter, lighter somehow. We hadn't planned anything, but when I arrived at the cafe, she was already waiting outside, her coat buttoned, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "Let's not stay inside today," she said. "Too many walls." So we walked. The morning air was cool, brushed with the scent of wet pavement and blooming jasmine from the street vendors nearby. The city still waking. Traffic soft, sunlight stretching lazy and gold across the rooftops. We didn't talk much, we didn't need to. There was a comfort in our silence now, a quiet rhythm that matched the echo of our footsteps. At a small park nearby, we stopped for coffee from a corner stand and sat on a bench overlooking the pond. She crossed her legs, the hem of her coat grazing mine, and I could feel the warmth of her presence. Steady, calm. "You know," she said after a long pause, "I kept telling myself this would fade, that it was just a passing comfort." "And?" I asked. Her eyes softened. It didn't fade. It just got harder to hide. The sunlight caught her face then, and for a brief moment, she looked untouched by time. Not because she was younger, but because she was present, alive in a way that only comes from letting go of fear. I smiled quietly. I'm glad you stopped trying to hide. She turned toward me, that familiar teasing spark back in her expression. Don't get used to me being this honest. I already have, I said. Her laughter came easily this time, light and unguarded. The sound wrapped around me like the breeze itself, gentle, fleeting, unforgettable. Later, we wandered through a small weekend market. She stopping to touch scarves, me pretending not to watch how her fingers moved across the fabric. When she found one she liked, she held it up against her neck and asked, "What do you think?" "It suits you," I said. "Warm, elegant." "Elegant?" she laughed. "That's your way of saying old." "Not at all," I replied. "It's my way of saying you make things look better just by being near them." Her gaze lingered on me a moment longer than usual. Then she slipped the scarf around her neck and whispered, "Careful. I might believe you." By the time the sun began to set, we found ourselves back near the cafe. The sky was painted in soft golds and dusky pinks, the air calm. She reached for my hand as we crossed the street. A simple, unthinking gesture, and didn't let go. We sat by the window sharing a quiet dinner. No big declarations, no promises, just two people who had stopped fighting what already was. As the light dimmed, she rested her hand over mine and said softly, "I wasn't looking for this, but I'm glad you stayed." I smiled. "I didn't plan to, but here we are." Her thumb brushed over my knuckles, slow and thoughtful. Outside, the city lights flickered awake. Inside, time stood still. And in that stillness, I realized we weren't chasing a story anymore. We were living one.